Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome back, and let's start the week off proper with another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
Your Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Steele Roden, flying solo again. Flip, rightfully enjoying his wedding this past weekend. I hope he enjoyed it. I hope everyone out there enjoyed their weekend as well. A lot of hockey to discuss and a lot of hockey to talk about. And of course, we're going to start off Monday like we usually do with Waiver-Wire Monday. Some pickups with guys who are, under the radar, owned less than at least 30% on ESPN and Yahoo fantasy leagues. And there's a couple of guys that I have, and coincidentally just happened to come from the Atlantic Division. All three of the guys I'm checking out for this upcoming week. The first guy, I've already talked about him over the last couple of episodes, and that's Boston Bruins forward Jake DeBrusk. I'm probably, I sound like a broken record at this point, but I really do feel that Jake DeBrusk is getting an opportunity, and he is showcasing his skill set in the first 2 weeks of this NHL season. He is currently owned at 21% on ESPN leagues, up 15% over the last couple of days. So people are taking notice of the skill set. People are taking notice of what he is producing up front for the Boston Bruins. And he has played, again, really, really great so far in the top six forward group. He's playing on that second line with Patrice, Bergeon, and Pavel, Zacha. Obviously, when Brad Marchand comes back from his injury in late November, Taylor Hall will be moved down to that second line. So that second line for the Bruins is going to get even better than what we're seeing so far early on in the season so far. So can't wait to see what the Bruins look like when Marchand, McAvoy, and even Carlo, I mentioned this before, when those three guys get back into the lineup, it's going to be able to obviously create some more skills, some more opportunities up front than what we've seen already from this Bruins team. And they have a very, very advantageous schedule coming up. They play the Stars, the Red Wings, and the Blue Jackets. Two of those teams, obviously the Red Wings and the Blue Jackets, a little bit lesser of a tier to play against. The Stars obviously having an absolute unreal start to the season as well. 4-0-1, have not lost in regulation yet. They lost to the Maple Leafs in overtime just a couple of days ago. But I really like Jake DeBrusk. He's showcasing that skill set, like I said on the other episode, where he's obviously finding his groove now with the organization. He's taken back that trade request he said to the organization just last year. It seems like he's starting to fit in. It seems like he's starting to like playing again for the Boston Bruins. And he's got 5 points so far in the season as well. 23 shots, So he's getting all of those opportunities. Those shots, blocks, and hits also add up for your fantasy league. So keep that in mind as well with Jake DeBrusk. The second guy also in the Atlantic Division, and I also mentioned him very, very quickly on our last episode here on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and that's Dominik Kubalik. With the injury to Tyler Patrice, he will be out for another 3 weeks minimums, probably more like a month at this point. But with the injury to Tyler Patrice, it's really creating this big opportunity for Kubalik to step up and really showcase the skill set that he has and sort of didn't really live up to with the Chicago Blackhawks. As of right now, he's playing on the top line with Patrice and with Dylan Larkin. He's on the top power play unit as well. He's got 3 goals and 5 assists so far to start the season. The problem with him, though, is he doesn't put up a ton of other stats in those categories. So shots, the plus minus has not been great so far in his career. The shots aren't great. The blocks, the hits aren't the best. But over the last couple of years, we have seen that go up in the right direction. So at the end of the season, I really do have him hitting over that mark of 170 shots, 30 blocks, and 95 hits, which is projected to be a lot better than last year. But again, playing with Chicago, he was only averaging 38 points. So hopefully being in this new setting, Flip and I talked about this at length over the offseason when Detroit was one of the really big hitters in the offseason, acquiring a lot of guys to make their team a lot better in this upcoming season. So playing alongside guys like Dylan Larkin, Tyler Bertuzzi when he comes back into the lineup, David Perron, Andrew Kopp, who has pretty much been invisible so far with his short stint with the Red Wings as well. But those guys, he's getting another opportunity with playing with some highly skilled level players for the Detroit Red Wings. And to have 3 goals, 8 points to start the season in five games, I believe, for the Red Wings, maybe even 5 games, is absolutely incredible to see him get this opportunity as well and be utilized properly by this organization as well. So another advantageous schedule for the Red Wings coming up this week. 3 games on the schedule. They play the Devils today. They also play the Boston Bruins, like I mentioned when I was talking about Jake DeBrusk, and they also play the Minnesota Wild on the weekend. Another team that has very much so struggled so far, finally got their first win against the Vancouver Canucks, and we'll get into that debacle of a team later in this episode. But another very advantageous week for the Red Wings, and it's just a great opportunity to go out and pick Dominik Kubalik, who is also owned only at 8% on ESPN leagues. He is one of those guys, again, playing on the top line, top power play unit, and with Bertuzzi out of the lineup, he's going to remain there for the foreseeable future. And maybe even if Bertuzzi comes back, maybe Bertuzzi just slides in on that second line with David Perron and Andrew Kopp as well, and sort of spread that love around on the forward group for the Detroit Red Wings. So that is the second player I'm looking at for the waiver wire this week. And another guy, my last guy, coming from the Atlantic Division again, coincidental that the 3 players that I'm looking at come from the same division. And it's Tyler Motte of the Ottawa Senators. I know a lot of people out there are probably thinking, Steele, what are you thinking right now? It's Tyler Motte. He's on the third line. Yeah, he's on the third line for the Ottawa Senators, but he's playing with Shane Pinto and Matthew Joseph as well. And by the way, Shane Pinto, I picked him up in a couple of my fantasy leagues. He's been outstanding so far, playing on the third line centerman, playing on the second power play unit with a lot of talented guys as well, but that is another discussion. Tyler Motte, only owned at 4.2% on ESPN leagues. And this is obviously not a guy who's going to go out and get a ton of points. He only has a career high of 16 points back in 2018 with the Vancouver Canucks. And like I said, playing on the third line, Pinto has been absolutely outstanding. He's been great in that bumper slot on the power play. But Mott, he's also playing on that second power play unit with Alex DeBrincat, with Claude Giroux, with Shane Pinto, Jake Sanderson on the blue line as well. So the Ottawa Senators have a really, really great dynamic power play unit with both their first and second units going really, really strong to start the season. Obviously, Pinto has been moved around, but again, Mott is playing along Pinto. He's getting the second power play unit time. He's got 14 shots, 8 blocks, and 14 hits so far to start the season. He's playing over 16 minutes so far with the Ottawa Senators to start the season. He's only played 5 games. He's got 5 points, 2 goals, 3 assists. And he's one of those guys, again, where last year or the year before that, because last year he dealt with injuries, he was one of those guys that I would look at on a weekly basis, see how many games he's playing that week. If he's playing 3 or if he's only playing 3 games, which teams is he playing? If he's playing 4 games, I need to get him in my lineup because just having that extra game for that week really does make a difference in your matchups for fantasy leagues. The Ottawa Senators have looked pretty decent so far to start the season as well. Flip and I talked about them alongside the Detroit Red Wings in the offseason. They really made some great moves. Hopefully Cam Talbot can come back from this injury and really help Anton Forsberg in the crease, split the time. It looks like Forsberg is settling in really nicely right now, but I would really like to see Cam Talbot and Anton Forsberg split the crease so both of them don't get overused where potentially if they were to make the playoffs, I know we're still at the beginning of the season, but if they do make the playoffs, you don't want to use one of them ever so slightly just in case, again, knock on wood, an injury happens for either of them. But Tyler Motte, Dominik Kubalik, and Jake DeBrusk, all 3 of those guys are owned less than 25% on ESPN leagues. Those are 3 guys that I'm looking at to start this week as well in my next matchups. And I will get to those matchups later in this episode, actually coming up after this break. And I got to let everyone know about Simply Safe. The numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen Simply Safe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. And at Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. I know because I use Simply Safe at my home, in my apartment right now. They protect you with cutting-edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/lockedonnhl. Save 20% on Simply Safe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month for free. Yes, free first month if you sign up for that interactive monitoring plan. Simplysafe.com/lockedonnhl to learn more, as well as use that code for 20% off once you sign up. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, though, go check out Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers all games from across the league with local analysis that only Locked On hosts can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube, just like this podcast. Hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all the love and support out there. And thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of the Waiver Wire of the Fantasy Hockey League as well, which we're going to dive into right now. But first, just a couple of updates. The Vancouver Canucks, still the only winless team so far in the NHL right now. It has not been very kind to the Canuck players. You know, looking back at the schedule, looking back at their matchups, to lose so many games, the first 3 games actually being up multiple goals, and then the next 3 games after that, a couple in overtime against the Columbus Blue Jackets, 1 in overtime against the Minnesota Wild. They lose to the Buffalo Sabres. It is just honestly very, very hard to see for the Vancouver Canucks to lose this badly and in this fashion. And it's not going to get any easier for the Vancouver Canucks this upcoming week. To start off the week, actually tonight, they take on the Carolina Hurricanes, which is not going to be an easy matchup. They also play the Seattle Kraken on Thursday and the Pittsburgh Penguins on Friday. So it's not going to be an easy matchup this week, especially tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes. Josh Norris of the Ottawa Senators is also out with the shoulder injury. There has been no update so far, so keep an eye out for any information involving Josh Norris and if he may be out long-term, if it's just a week or a day-to-day thing. If anything does pop up, Flip and I will be right on that. We'll send out a tweet on our Twitter account. So keep an eye out for that. We'll get the information out there for you for whoever has Josh Norris in their fantasy leagues. Quinn Hughes is also day-to-day with a lower body injury. So another Vancouver Canuck player out of the lineup currently, which might hurt some of your fantasy matchups for this upcoming week. Speaking of fantasy matchups, it was a rough week for myself in both of my fantasy leagues on ESPN. Lost both my matchups this week on ESPN. They were pretty close though. The one though for the Locked On fantasy based league took a pretty hard loss there to Matt Westfall, aka Coochie Coochie Coo. He takes the dub 5-4-2 in week 1. Again, shout out to Matt Westfall. I thought I had you on Friday. Obviously, the weekend did not do me so well. I lost that 5-4-2 in week 1. Flip did also not have, his matchup did not go any better. He lost 6-3-2 to the Golden Girls, aka Blake Creamer. Hopefully, the boys can bounce back in a big way for week 2. But again, not the start that either of us were looking for. It just, when it came down to it on Sunday, couple of goals, a couple of assists really just put me behind, and there was no possible way of clawing my way back in that one. That one hurt a little bit to have, but we're looking ahead to week 2 now. This is why we were talking about the waiver wire on Monday. Those are 3 guys that I'm looking at to pick up in both my fantasy leagues. As currently I'm dealing with a couple of injuries to my lineup. That's it for the fantasy league, though. That's it for the fantasy league talk. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube. So thank you so much for hitting the subscribe, hitting the follow button, Flip, and I appreciate all the love and support. And Flip, if you're tuning in, can't wait to have you back on the podcast. I think the fans are missing it. They miss your insight. They miss your input. So do I. You have a lot of great things to add to this. Hopefully you enjoy, congratulations again on the wedding. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it was a good time. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit better to start this week after a tough loss. But again, congratulations on that. With that being said, let's get over to the big time bets for Monday night. The lock of the night. I'm taking the Hurricanes on the money line, -150 against the Vancouver Canucks. There's no other way to put it. The Canucks, again, haven't won a game yet. It's not going to get any easier against the Carolina Hurricanes. And honestly, it's just been very sad to see for this organization. And me living in Vancouver now, the streets haven't been too kind either. Fans throwing off jerseys on the ice, fans throwing off jerseys in the garbage cans, walking down the street. So it's tough to see in Vancouver, but hopefully they can turn things around, but not on Monday night, because I've got the Hurricanes on the money line at -150 as my lock of the night. My second pick of the night, I'm taking the Senators on the money line, +100 versus the Stars. They're playing at home, and in their last 10 games, the Ottawa Senators have actually are 8-2 against the Dallas Stars. So they have a great record against the Stars, especially at home. Taking them +100 on the money line. I really like where this team is heading. We've talked about it at length, so I'll leave it there. My final bet of the night, I'm taking the Maple Leafs on the road, -120 against the Vegas Golden Knights. They're 6-2 all-time record against the Vegas Golden Knights in the 8 matchups they've played against. And just for an honorable mention, I'm going to throw Austin Matthews anytime goal. It's been too long since we've seen a goal from this guy. He's only got 1 goal so far in the season. He does have 6 assists, though. But we need to see Austin Matthews put the puck behind the net, or put the puck in the net, hit the mesh, and throw his arms up in celebration, because I know a lot of Leaf fans out there will do the exact same thing. They need this guy to score more goals. We know he can score the goals, and I believe he will do that on the road against the Vegas Golden Knights. Those are my bets of the night. My lock of the night, Hurricanes again on the money line, -150. Hopefully I can win you guys some money out there. I did start to turn things around later in the week, last week. I believe my record right now is 13-17, so it's gotten a little bit better since Thursday and Friday. Hopefully we can keep that trending in the right direction. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, which also includes YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. I know I say this every time, but we really do appreciate you guys tuning in, subscribing, following us. We see all the comments. We see all the DMs on Twitter. Please make sure you're keeping up with that. Send any questions you have. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Once you do subscribe or follow, you'll get all the latest episodes Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with just myself, Steele Roden. Have a great day. If you've placed any bets, if you've put any money down, hopefully you can get the moolah back in return. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.